Thank you for coming. Join tonight's event for exhibition for the Ocean of Memories. First of all, I will thank the exhibition's curator, Lien. Raise your hand. Yeah, I think most of us know him well. Yeah, and I also have this exhibition have two galleries to help us. The first one is Glass Garage Gallery. It's a very strong name. His founder is also Lien. And the second gallery is VG Gallery. The owner is own Biker. Yeah, it's here. Yeah, Biker is Biker. And we also have four very special artists. Danielle, Eubank. Over there. And Susan Hannon. And Fong-Chi Lien. From Taiwan, yeah. Cindy Shih. Yeah, thank you them for their contribution. Yeah, without them, this exhibition we cannot be present here. And now let me make a shift to curator. That's welcome to start tonight's program. Yeah.
This is a special exhibition. It means a lot to everybody participating. It's a very personal exhibition. This exhibition is called The Ocean of Memories, and it is composed of artwork that is inspired by a couple of themes. The ocean, memories, and the ways that they are metaphors for immigration, travel, and crossing cultures. This show is made possible by the generous support of the Taiwan Academy in Los Angeles. And Taiwan is an island nation. And like all island nations, we are defined by our relationship with the ocean. The ocean divides us from everybody. So we are isolated because of the ocean. However, the ocean connects us to everybody as well. We have to cross an ocean to go anywhere else. And the crossing of an ocean, physically, emotionally, culturally, is a basic and important and enriching human experience. Memories are also like the ocean because they can divide and unite. Our memories are composed of our individual experiences, and that means they're going to be very specific to our circumstances. I hate the term the human condition because there is not one human condition. That's a very presumptuous idea to think that my experience is going to be your experience, is going to be her experience, is going to be his experience. My experiences, my memories are influenced by what I've had access to and what I haven't had access to. So they divide me from everybody else. But there's a natural human tendency to look for commonality. Right now, as I'm telling these stories, and as these artists tell these stories, the goodness in your hearts is trying to find some commonality with them. And that is how memories can unite us with people. They trigger the innate human need to find a commonality. So memories too, even though they might be born of individual specific experience that you might not share, the goodness in you is going to find a commonality, so it unites us as well. So without further ado, let's start with our first artist, Susan Hannon. Susan is an artist originally from Canada, now living in Los Angeles. She's best known for a body of work that is composed of vintage Bibles and other sacred books that are falling apart that she has repurposed and given new life to in the form of sculptures in the shape of wings. Her art has been featured in magazines such as Art in America and the Huffington Post. Susan, do you remember your first memory of the ocean? Did you grow up around the ocean?
No, actually, I grew up in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, which is absolutely landlocked. And I had never seen a real large body of water. But when I was 16, I took a high school trip to Osaka, Japan. And of course, I never really liked water where I was from because it was so cold all the time. But on this particular trip, we were going to be flying over the ocean. And I had never even been on a plane before. So we started out, and it was towards the end of the flight. And 45 minutes outside of Osaka, the plane just dropped right out of the air. It dropped so hard that my stomach was then where my mouth was. And it was very bad because the seatbelt signs went on and the stewardesses ran down the aisle screaming, "Get into your seats, get into your seats." And we kept dropping through the air. So when I looked out, I couldn't see anything except this huge ocean. Well, we finally saw a tiny bit of land, and we landed safely, and we cheered and we clapped, and everybody was very happy to be alive, and I was so happy to be back on the ground. And it turned out that we just didn't experience a little bit of turbulence or some bad turbulence. We'd actually lost an engine. And so that was my first experience of being over the ocean, was in a plane that was kind of starting to go down.
So even though your first encounter with the ocean almost kills you, it becomes your grave, the idea of flight and journeys is consistent in your work. The idea of crossing cultures is consistent in your work. You work with materials that are not from your own tradition. You are not a practicing Christian. This piece is made from a Chinese dictionary. You don't speak Chinese. What is it about other traditions that draws you? What makes you visit the things of flight, journeys, and work in materials from another tradition other than your own?
For me, it's very exciting because I get to look and see and ruminate about things that have nothing to do with me. So when I did this particular piece for the show, I loved the fact that it was a Chinese dictionary because instead of working with the Bible has one story to tell, but this actually has two stories to tell, one in English and one in Chinese. So it was a really wonderful experience. It was a happier, lighter project to put together. And it's really about the flight of two cultures coming together, or one culture going this way and one culture flying that way.
So unlike the other books that you have worked with, which are intending to convey a doctrine, a point of view, a religious point of view, this is a two-way conversation.
Yes.
Where these two cultures are trying to bridge a metaphorical ocean and understand each other.
Yes, yes.
Thank you very much, Susan.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
And our next artist is Cindy Shirt. Cindy is an artist originally from Taiwan, now living in San Francisco. Her artwork explores nature as metaphor. She also combines Western-inspired techniques such as fresco painting with Chinese elements such as the motifs from Song Dynasty landscape painting. Cindy, do you remember your first encounter with the ocean?
I do. When I came, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I came to America when I was 3, and so I remember crossing an endless darkness, just not seeing anything for a long time. I don't remember a whole lot because I was very young, but I do remember seeing a lot, just some little lights come up, and I asked my mother, I said, what is that? And she said, that was America.
So you made that crossing across the culture very young. Do you remember what that was like growing up as an immigrant in America?
Definitely. I mean, I was a kid with the weird lunch, I didn't have what everyone else was eating, so I remember having, seaweed. My grandmother put seaweed in my lunch, and I told my friends, I said, I really like seaweed, and they were like, that's fish to eat, and I poop on it and stuff. You eat fish food, so I got ridiculed quite a bit for that.
And did you make the journey back across that ocean, back to Taiwan and China? What was that like?
Yes, actually, I was sent to Beijing to start a team for Google. I was working there for 7 years. And I was sent there to start a team because I spoke Mandarin. A lot of times people don't think I speak Mandarin, so I actually hear them speaking Mandarin about me. But also, when I went to Beijing and my first day there, my counterpart was screaming at me, yelling at me across the conference room saying, "Don't bring your US point of view here." So I was really taken aback by that.
So you were sent there because you were considered to be an insider by these outsiders here in the U.S.
Right.
You arrived here and you were told you are also an outsider in another way that you didn't expect.
Absolutely.
So being on the outside, you have experience with that. You understand what it's like to be on the outside of various insides. Tell us about that particular theme in this work.
So this piece, did it for the show. It's actually called Hawaii, which is translated to outside the ocean. And I loosely, it was inspired by the shape of a Mobius strip, and it has kind of a dragon-like quality to it, which I like as well. But the Mobius strip, which Henry will explain, it's a shape that you could be inside and outside simultaneously.
Right. So if you don't remember from elementary school math class, a Mobius strip is a paradox from math. It's a loop. You can model it with a loop of paper. But the thing is, when you connect the loop of paper, before you tape it together, you give it a half twist, and then you tape it together. And then you've created something that should not exist in this world because it has one surface. If you draw a line on the outside of it, it'll continue on the inside of it, and then return on the outside of it. So it only has one side. You are holding a one-dimensional object in your hand. You've created it. It should not exist, but it does. But the beautiful metaphor in it is that what we think is outside and inside are really the same thing. They are intertwined. And this particular painting is entitled Hawaii. What does that mean to the Chinese-speaking world? What is that term? Who is referred to by that term, Hawaii?
It's referred to the Chinese diaspora who has gone outside of the ocean or gone outside the Chinese-speaking world. And so to me it has particular significance because to me I've always been sort of inside and outside at the same time.
Yeah, so it's a term that is meant to refer to the fact that these people are no longer part of the Chinese-speaking world, but they are still part of the culture in some important defining way.
Absolutely.
And there are a lot of motifs from nature here, as there are in many of your works. I mean, I see, tell me what you see.
Well, a lot of it is inspired by Chinese brush painting. I work in that motif a lot. My father is a calligrapher, so I was drilled in that for a long time. And it sort of appeared in my work, and the lines and everything that kind of flows into it is abstract, but also conjures up a certain energy of gathering energy and sort of releasing it in a way of almost like cyclones or storms. So it's definitely a very passionate piece for me.
Yeah, I picked that up as well. The idea of forces pushing out, pulling in, like cyclones, like whirlpools, and that was resonant for me because cyclones and whirlpools, these are forces of nature that both suck in and push out. And I thought that was a beautiful metaphor for the way that societies will draw immigrants to them, and then once they're here, push them to the margins. The fact that these are references to things from nature is beautiful, I think, because it reminds us that the idea of being pulled in, being an insider, pushed out, being an outsider, they are in constant alternation in nature. They are all temporary states. And that sometimes being pushed out, being an outsider, is a very natural state. And there is nothing to be ashamed of in feeling like an outsider.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next artist. Our next artist is Danielle Eubank. Danielle is an American painter living in the Los Angeles area. Her work explores an interesting collision between abstraction and representation, with a particular emphasis on themes of water and humanity's relationship with nature. Danielle has been exhibited in museums in the US and China, and is the recipient of the prestigious Polly Krasner Foundation grant. Danielle has also worked in an unusual capacity for an artist as an expedition artist. Tell us a little bit about what that is.
Hi, everybody. So I am indeed an expedition artist. I've been on 3 international sailing expeditions. One was an Indonesian, the first one was an Indonesian vessel, which was based on stone relief carvings, 4 stone relief carvings of this completely wacky vessel with 2 biped masts and double outriggers, and that was from the Borobudur Temple in central Java.
And so this was a recreation of this ship, correct?
Yes, it was
All
a
right.
recreation of the ship because there are cultural similarities between Indonesia and West Africa, and nobody knows how that happened.
That predate what we have recorded as the first contact between...
Correct.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
So this is a recreation of a ship based on a carving somebody saw in a temple somewhere, and he said, I'm going to build that, and I'm going to entrust lives onto that ship, and we're going to sail it around Africa.
Yeah, and somehow he got the Ministry of Culture and UNESCO to sponsor it.
And you did sail on it. Yeah. Okay, and your task was to capture this experience in paint.
Correct. The task and the people and the places we went.
Uh-huh. And other expeditions that you went on. Tell us
Yeah,
about
so
this.
the next expedition I went on was of an older vessel, so that was 8th century Common Era, and then the next one was 6th century BCE, so 6 centuries before the birth of Christ, basically, and it was a Phoenician boat, because Herodotus, the father of all history, said that the Phoenicians were the first people to round the Cape of Good Hope, which meant that we had to circumnavigate Africa in this ancient vessel.
Okay,
And
now-
that was 2,000 years before what the Europeans thought was the first rounding.
So this vessel was a recreation not of something that somebody saw on a wall in temple, but of an actual ship. But where was this ship found?
The actual ship was found on the bottom of the Mediterranean Sea. It's the Jules Verne 7. It's based on the Jules Verne 7, which is currently being studied off of Marseille, or found off of Marseille.
So you sail on a ship one that's based on this crazy sculpture that might not exist, frankly, and then one is based on a ship that wrecked and sank to the bottom of the sea.
And I did not mention this to my mother.
No.
Other expeditions that you went on, and these took you to different places and cultures and peoples. And
Yes.
tell us about some other expeditions.
Yes. So the Phoenicia is still ongoing. So we did successfully circumnavigate Africa. It will be coming to the Americas soon. But yeah, the most recent expedition is an Arctic expedition, and that's on a completely modern vessel from the 1950s.
All right.
Which for the other people, they thought that was a really old boat, but to me, that was a brand new boat. It's a 3-masted sailboat, and we sailed that right up to where the polar ice cap starts.
But what was that experience like? I mean, you've been to very foreign cultures and places before. This sounds like a very foreign environment visually. What was it like visually for you as an artist?
It was, yeah, so I'm pretty well traveled, so I knew it would be different, but I didn't know how different it would be. When I got there, my mind was blown. It was, first of all, everything was kind of a Prussian blue color, so the light was different. The sun was different insofar as it just did this little thing, and then by the end, we never saw the sun. The earth was different insofar as it was liquid for the first meter, right, and then frozen for the next mile, permafrost. What else? The water was completely different. So the way that it froze in the water when we were sailing, and also on Earth, the way that it froze or didn't freeze. What else? Earth, air, water,
So
everything
it
was
wasn't
completely
this
different.
winter wonderland as we think it would be, with fluffy bears and penguins and...
Well, I saw Santa.
Was he blue too?
Yeah.
So water is obviously a source of inspiration for you. How many bodies of water have you visited and painted?
I've visited a lot more than I've painted, but I've painted about 250 bodies of water so far.
And were they all similar?
They're all completely different. So hopefully you'll get an emotive response from my works. Like, for example, the one that's furthest on the right, that's Venice, Italy. And that should feel pretty different from, say, the Arctic here. It should feel very different.
Well, there is this tension between abstraction and representation in your work. And it's two experiences. When I'm looking at it from a couple inches away, and it is an abstract painting, but back there you are seeing a representational painting that has more emotion than I can experience here. And there is this tension, this paradox in your artwork where you're painting in an abstract technique, abstract forms, but it doesn't lose the emotion of the water. Talk to us about that paradox.
Well, first of all, I hope you all do come up to all 4 of our works and look at them really closely, because you'll notice very different things in everybody's work if you do that. If you know anything about art history, you'll know that Kandinsky is credited with sort of inventing abstraction, right? Abstract painting. What he did is he tried to paint the emotions from music. Music is purely abstract. So he took triangles, lines, rectangles, and circles, and he created paintings, oil paintings, to represent these emotions. But for me, that leaves me completely cold. I don't get the kind of emotion that I feel like I should get by looking at these paintings. I love his work, but I just don't get that emotion. So for me, what's more emotional, and maybe it's because I'm from an area near the water, or maybe it's because I'm from the country, I don't know. But these kinds of more organic shapes give me a lot more emotion. And I think that we're all kind of hardwired, because at the end of the day, we are natural animals from this planet, right? That's something that we all have in common. I think that we get our emotion from that, we don't even realize it.
Yeah, I think that's part of the unique nature of working in imagery and water. We're used to looking at water, and the painting of Venice there, we know what Venice looks like, and we know that that's a representation of what water does to Venice. We know that water naturally abstracts shapes that we recognize in nature, but without turning it into some sort of geometric collage that has no emotion. That still has the romance of Venice in it. The forms are still recognizable because we understand water will play with light and form and color in these ways. We live in a world surrounded by things that are a natural abstraction machine, but it doesn't mean it has to be an emotion subtraction machine. That's the paradox of working in the theme of water. You get all the intellectual playfulness of abstraction, but also all of the emotion. As part of the paradox of working with the bodies of water that you've seen, you've said that they are all different in their own ways, but they're all recognizable. It just the way we've been talking about how people are different, memories are different, but also the same. Thank you very much, Dan.
Thank you.
Our final artist is Fong-Chi Lien. Mr. Lien is an artist originally from Taiwan, now living in Los Angeles. He worked for 30 years as an engineer with the Associated Press and was honored with its highest award, the Grammy Award. After retirement, he became a fine art photographer and has been featured in institutional and private gallery exhibitions and collected by individual and corporate collectors. Tell us about your first encounter with the water, your first memory of the water.
During World War II, I was 4 years old, and my parents rented some rooms from a friend's farmhouse out in the country because Japanese was bombing my hometown. The farm has a reservoir bigger than a pond with dirt walkway running right in the middle with the water on both sides. So one day, my brother and I were walking on the dirt walkway, and there's a water buffalo walking toward us.
Now, you're walking along this dirt walkway, a water buffalo's coming at you, you're 4 years old or however old you are. Do you know how to swim?
No.
Water on both sides, okay. Please continue.
So, by the time we met, she was so big because pregnant.
The water buffalo.
Yeah. So she pushed me in the water. And I fell in, and I just screaming and kicking as hard as I can, and I didn't sink. So just a short moment later, my brother was in the water holding my foot and pulled me to the shore, and that he saved my life. And that's my first encounter.
So the first time you were introduced to water, it almost kills you. Did that make you stay away from the water?
No.
Okay, tell us about your childhood experiences with water. Tell us about what that was like.
Because we are poor, so I wasn't able to make friends, and I was alone a lot. And I would go to my neighbors, close to my house, the riverbank of Fong-Chi River, and I pray on the sand. And one day, I was crawling in the sand with the knee-high water, and I found something hard. It was a clam. So I began collecting the clams and brought them home to my mother to cook. Even though I don't know how to swim, I have no sense of danger about the drowning. I consider water as a friend. I pray with it, and it also fed me.
So you overcame what should have been fear of the water, but you found a way to have a relationship with the water, and it was your friend and it fed you. Now, did that relationship continue into adulthood?
No, there's a big interruption because the school, work, family, so the part that I completely disconnect from the water.
And what about after you came to the United States?
Well, eventually I moved to the United States, and I worked my way up to become the engineer and manager for the Associated Press specialized in telecommunication engineering. I traveled extensively around the Pacific region, and I was fortunate to be able to expose to the world's best photojournalists. I always brought a camera with me where I was traveling, and I'd have to take the photo of the water of those islands, and then I will review it and I enjoy it later, and that I really enjoy a part of my experience.
But you didn't think that you didn't have the opportunity to pursue photography as an art. What happened after retirement?
Yeah, after I retired, and I realized photography is one of the new adventures waiting for me. So I start studying and practice, and eventually I become a fine art photographer. And I found out my life, because I've become much, much richer than I had ever been, and I never saw that can be possible.
So water has been central in every stage of your life. You first were introduced to it, and it represented something that could have destroyed you. And you did not shy away from it. You came back to it, and you made friends with it, and it fed you. Then you wandered away from it, but found your way back to it ultimately. And now in this last part of your life, it's given you an entirely new life. So water can kill, water can feed and nourish, and water can give life, including new life.
Yes, indeed. Wonderful.
Thank you very much. Please feel free to talk with the artists. They have prepared a lot more material than we had time during this lecture, but they are very passionate about their work, very happy to be part of this show. This show means a lot to all of us in this particular time. This show is a reminder that immigration, crossing cultures, learning new things is an integral part of being human. Why would we want to speak one language, hear one type of music, eat one type of food for the rest of our lives? This is the way that it's supposed to be. This is the America that I want to live in. Thank you for being part of that.
Bravo.